Welcome to Custom Home Builder Solutions, also known as CHS, a job costing, full accounting, and profit management software for the professional home builder. This is going to be the beginning of a series of videos about posting accounts receivable or monies due to your company in the accounts receivable, being able to do that and then prepare invoices and statements, etc. However, before I start talking about it, I'd like to talk to home builders and mention that there are features here to do draw requests that actually pull on your job costs if they're a cost plus markup, percent complete, that you can do draws based on a percent of the budget that you did, or some fill-in spreadsheets. I'd like you to pay attention to the information about draw requests before thinking that you might post some amount due to you that would be a draw in accounts receivable. A lot of times accounts receivable isn't used that much by custom home builders. They're using the draw request features, which I'll describe later, but they might have some little amounts due from somebody that they want to post as some little receivable. And also, like I've actually already done a video about setting up accounts receivable for property management and collecting rents. And there may be other reasons that you're using the accounts receivable thing, but if you're a home builder and doing draw requests, you probably won't post those to accounts receivable, and we'll talk about that later. Now first, in this video, I'd like to talk a tiny bit about setting up for accounts receivable, and we'll post just one quick invoice, just a simple invoice, and then we'll go on to some other videos about how you can post receivables from elsewhere like accounts payable, etc. But first, let's talk about setting up for accounts receivable. I'm going to go open the chart of accounts for just a minute. And if you load the NAHB chart of accounts and stuff, some of this I'm about to say will already be in there for you. But if you've set up your own, you might need to have an account under receivables, maybe some sort of group heading like receivables. A lot of times people call it accounts receivable trade when it's a general accounts receivable account. But CHS needs to know when you make an accounts receivable invoice, it needs to know which account you're using to for CHS to post the offset entry to accounts receivable. When you post an invoice, you'll be selecting a GL account, for maybe some income account or this and that to post that to, but the offset CHS will post to an accounts receivable account. So I clicked the button on the chart of accounts for set control accounts, and that's what you need to make sure is done. You only have to do this once, is that you set which account is going to be your control account for accounts receivable. Like I said, if you load the NAHB, that will probably already be there. I just wanted to mention that real quick. And there's something we're going to come back and talk about in later videos, but on your company master during your setup, one of the questions it asks is recognize revenues when AR is posted. And that will be defaulted to be check marked. That's usually people on an accrual basis, etc., will recognize revenues when accounts receivable are posted, or go ahead and post it straight to whatever GL account you're using there, like maybe remodeling income or some other account. If this is check marked, it'll put it in that account right away. If it's unchecked, and you can click this little question mark button to read some more about this, but we're actually going to have a whole video about this, so I won't get too detailed. But if you uncheck it, that means CHS is going to hold on to the GL account you use, and it's going to put it into a temporary, account called revenues to recognize later thing, which we'll get into in that. But you need to make a decision, discuss with your accountant if you're wanting, basically if you uncheck it, you're wanting to post accounts receivable as if you're on the cash basis method of accounting. Most people are on accrual. They leave this check marked and they don't worry about it because it's actually a little more cumbersome to try to take care of handling that as if you're on a cash basis. But we'll have a whole video about that. But I just wanted to mention that's one decision you might be wanting to make with your accountant up front. So in this video, let's just post a very simple accounts receivable invoice it would show up for something that I'm going to say that it's me that owes Robert's Custom Home something. Maybe for maybe Robert's Custom Home helped me with some consulting for an hour to that I paid for or something, and also maybe I owe some for some office supply thing that he picked up at the store for me and brought by. So we're going to play like we're doing that. So I clicked under receivables deposits, I clicked accounts receivable, and the accounts receivable menu opened, and we're going to just start with this first button, add new receivables invoice. And so I clicked that button. Now first of all, it's asking for a payor, and by payor we mean anybody who pays our company money. You could be a customer, a bank, an employee, somebody. And if you do the drop-down list, you'll see payors that you've already set up, etc. So if I click Carol King, the next thing that happens is that CHS will look to see if I've set up any alerts in notes and activities to remind myself about. And notice how this says collect $75.25 for reimbursement of office setup. So that gives me a number that I need to use in making this accounts receivable entry. You can watch other videos, etc., about setting up activities, but you could click to add a new activity and watch this help here for help about setting up activities and marking them as an alert. It's this alert status that caused this to pop up after I selected it. You can not mark them as alert and then it wouldn't pop up. But since I know I'm about to do this, I might go ahead and edit this one. And I might go ahead and mark it as done today. And that'll take it out of the alert status. It saves automatically when I'm doing things. If it's dim, it means it's saved automatically. So I'll close that. And you notice the alert went away and it shows that it's done. If I select some other payer, let's just randomly do something that doesn't have a thing, and let's select King again. Now I'm not getting any pop-up because I have no alerts. If I ever want to look at past alerts or past activities, I can click that button that I clicked down there to see activities for the payer. It says payer activities list. If you're wanting to read any other notes or anything somebody might have. You need to do the help about setting up payers that you'll find on the payers window. If you decide you want to use this plus button for add a new payor, basically I'm going to click to edit this payor. And when you add a new payer, you'll be assigning it a payer ID and basically filling out these very same fields. I set this payer up as just a type of miscellaneous as a payer type. You'll notice that if I click one of these other ones I set up, and it's in another video, I set up, whoops, I don't want to add a new payer. I'm going to look at the edit screen. But I did a type of renter when I set that one up, which will be important in another couple of videos that we're going to look at. Notice that after I select payer Dan Green, it supplied an invoice number and it supplied a job code, and that's because when we set up the job, if we look at the job setup for the job that dropped in, you can see that we've attached Dan Green as, we selected his payer ID and selected him as a buyer for this job. So CHS went and looked for that after Dan Green got selected. And when you set up a job, you also attach a department to it. So that also dropped in. But I'm going to go back to King Carol now. So that's just a little bit about this window. So there's no job found for me, and I'm in the department overhead. You can select a different department. You can select a job if you want for some reason this to be entered as a job receivables. But we'll talk about some of that doing some of that a little bit later. But anyway, CHS will give you an invoice number here, the next invoice number up. The drop down here for the invoice number is just to see other invoice numbers that have been issued to everybody, and it'll be in descending order. You can see that. So you can see the last invoice number issued. You can type in your own if you wanted. Now I've forgotten what the other invoice number was that it gave me, 1015. If there's some reason you want to, but it cannot be a duplicate, you can type that in yourself. If you don't like anything you've done, you could reset the form to make it blank again. I could reset the form. It'll leave that number CHS found. It makes the form blank. It defaults to job H and department OH, and then you can change those as needed as you enter accounts receivable and watch information about departments. And we can do little financials by job and by department, and show how much is in there for accounts receivable for each job or for each department. Down here is a note, which I already mentioned. You do not need an accounts receivable invoice in order to post a cash deposit. A lot of programs, maybe even QuickBooks, some kind of insist on some receivables invoice when you're posting a deposit. You do not have to have that in CHS. And like I said, most home builders will not be creating very many AR invoices unless they need to bill something for something other than job costs. Builders generally simply recognize down payments, draws, final contract revenues by posting them as a deposit at the time they are received, and to please review those draw request features again. So let's create our new AR invoice. And you can do as many lines as you like, and I'll show you how we can do a second line. Let's, because my help document has this date on it, we'll just select a date. CHS will do some checking, and if it decides, let's take a look up here at the current period that has been set up by the controller in the company for right now. The current period is 1/1/2015. I have that level, so let's make this 2016 for some reason, and January 1st. I have that level of permission. It takes a higher level of permission to set these. And I could set it to say allow entries outside of period, and I've set it to no, but I could set it to yes, and the user would just get a warning that it was outside of a period. But let's save that, and let's try to do one in 2015 for whatever reason. Date entered is before the beginning date of 1/1/16 for your current accounting period and may not be allowed when you submit. It's giving a warning about that. If you've set it to no, it's not going to let you. When you click submit, it will look for that and it won't let you. But let's get back to doing an April 12th one. It also will warn you if it's a really old date or if it's a date way in the future. So pay attention to those warnings. And one of the warnings talks about clicking this button to see what your current period is, like I just did. Now, one thing we can do is we could look at all the AR invoices for the payor. There isn't any. We do know that we want to use, we want to collect that $75.25 for office supplies that Mr. Roberts picked up for us that we need to reimburse them for, but Roberts is preparing this invoice, and so it's C keying maybe reimburse Office Depot supply. You could do some extra notes here. Maybe you know what it was that was purchased. A note you might list what the supplies were. You know, something like that. Who knows? So I did a brief description, and I typed in an amount. Cost codes you rarely use unless it's really just sort of a notation field in case you're wanting to show what kind of costs you're billing somebody for. That's actually used more in the job cost billing, which will be one of the videos that has to do with accounts receivable or in the draw requests area. But anyway, so we've done one line for that. Now we need to do a second line. We could either copy the line, or let me delete that line. We could just add a new line because we're going to make it so different or something. Let's use 4/12, but maybe we wanted to use the same date, so we could have copied. We have one more thing we want to charge for at 1 hour for consulting. So we're going to use a GL number of 3400 for just miscellaneous, and we want to bill CHS Consulting 1 hour for maybe $100, I don't know. Just another line, consult regarding CHS features, 1 hour. You don't have to type notes for the invoice. These will just show up on the invoice and might help. So now you'll see with the two lines added together, we have an invoice total of $175.25. And it does have a note down here that if you leave a zero amount, it'll just be ignored. So you have to have an amount on the line for it to get posted. Let me submit this AR invoice. And it says it's been posted and will close. And I think it was telling me that I could review those invoices on this window. We're actually going to come back to this window and do a lot more work with it in a later video, but I will show you how this shows things by payor, the total balance for the payor, and then starts grouping things by invoice number. There's our invoice number. And this little hyperlink here for View JE means that I can see what CHS did in the background posting this entry. And you can see that it used our control account, accounts receivable trade, to put in a debit, and then it put a credit to office supplies, which would actually lower our office supplies, and another debit for that consulting to accounts receivable trade, which increases accounts receivable, and miscellaneous income. Income is usually always credit, so this increased the miscellaneous income right now. Again, like I said, if you're trying to be on a cash basis, there would be a little bit of difference in what happens if you had unchecked that box that I showed you on the company master, which again we'll come back to in a later video. Down here you can see what filters were used: the journal AR, GL date, document ID. It used filters to show us this JE based on that. Now notice that these entries say AR. That means they were posted from the accounts receivable features created in the AR journal. That's accounts receivable, and that's where they came from. Notice how this one has a little AP. That means, and I'm going to show you this in the very next video, that this receivables invoice was actually created when entering a bill to pay. And I'd like to mention that, say this reimburse Office Depot Supply, if I had been posting the bill to Office Depot Supply that they sent to me, and I knew that this much of that bill was for Carol King, I could have actually created this part of this receivables directly from the accounts payable screen, but I'll use a little different example for that, and you'll see that in the next video. There will also be things showing that they are from the journal deposit, because that's where you posted a payment. You can see that the balance here for this person is zero because a payment came in. And the other journal that could be showing up here could be PR for payroll, when you're taking advances or adding advances to employees, and we'll see that in probably the video after next, creating a payables entry. Now notice that there is a help button on most of these screens, and the top part of it is accounts receivable, and that we have a full help document about these things that I am talking about, and I'm trying to follow it right now so I give the very same examples. But you could print this out. If I go down a page, you can see how right here I'm creating that entry, that direct accounts receivable entry. And the very next thing I'll be doing is posting to accounts receivable from accounts payable, creating something over there where I'm paying somebody else for something that somebody is going to reimburse me for. So anyway, that should be it for right now. Please continue the next video. This video covered just posting a simple direct accounts receivable invoice. And thank you for watching.